Don't close your eyes, ma'am. Please don't close your eyes. Caleb's hands were soaked in blood that wasn't his. He was 6 years old, barefoot, 41 pounds of skin and bone and cigarette burns, kneeling in broken glass inside a wrecked truck on County Road 9, pressing a rag against a dying woman's skull while her blood ran down his wrists and mixed with scars that nobody had ever bothered to ask about. He'd stolen soup cans 10 minutes ago. Now he was holding a stranger's life together with hands too small to tie his own shoes. He didn't know she was the matriarch of the Hells Angels. He didn't know her son had been searching for him since the day he was born. And he didn't know that these 22 minutes would destroy a criminal empire and bring a father to his knees. Before we begin this story, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit subscribe. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. Caleb Turner hadn't eaten in 2 days. Not the kind of hungry where your stomach growls and you think about pizza. The kind where your body stops asking and starts taking. Where your hands shake and your vision gets fuzzy around the edges. And you can feel your own heartbeat in your teeth because there's nothing left inside you to absorb the shock of being alive. He was 6 years old, blonde hair so dirty it looked brown, an oversized t-shirt that hung to his knees, the collar stretched out so far it kept sliding off one shoulder, exposing skin that was mottled with bruises in various stages of healing, yellow ones fading, purple ones fresh. And on the inside of his left wrist, 3 perfect circles burned into the skin. Cigarette burns, deliberate, precise, the kind of marks that don't come from accidents. He walked along County Road 9 outside Shelby Creek, Tennessee, carrying a plastic grocery bag with 2 cans of chicken soup and a loaf of white bread he'd stolen from the Dollar General a mile back. His sneakers had no laces. The sole on the right one flapped with every step, slapping the hot asphalt like a broken metronome, counting down to something he couldn't name. The road was empty. August heat pressed down like a hand on his chest. No cars, no houses for half a mile in either direction. Just Caleb and the road, and the buzzing of cicadas in the tree line, and the grocery bag bumping against his bare leg as he walked. He heard the crash before he saw it. Metal screaming against metal, glass shattering, the sickening crunch of a vehicle leaving the road at speed and hitting something that didn't move. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after violence, when the world holds its breath and waits to see what's left. Caleb froze. Every instinct he'd developed in 6 years of surviving Dale Scoggins told him the same thing. Keep walking. Don't look. Don't get involved. Invisible boys survive. Visible boys get hurt. But then he heard her voice. Help. Weak, trembling, barely a word at all, more like a prayer that had given up on being answered. Please, somebody, help me. Caleb's feet moved before his brain gave permission. He rounded the bend and saw the truck. A blue Chevy pickup, old and rusted, lying sideways in the drainage ditch like a wounded animal. Smoke curled from under the crumpled hood. The windshield was a spider web of cracks. The driver's side door was crushed inward, and inside, trapped behind the steering column, with blood running from a gash on her forehead, was an old woman. Silver white hair, thin as a bird, her left leg pinned at an angle that made Caleb's stomach flip. Her hands, weathered and scarred, gripped the steering wheel like she was still trying to drive, still trying to get somewhere that mattered. Her eyes found Caleb through the shattered passenger window. They were gray-blue and sharp, despite the blood and the shock and the pain. And when she saw him, when she saw this small, dirty, barefoot boy standing on the side of the road with a plastic grocery bag, something happened in those eyes. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "you're just a baby. Go find a grown-up." But there were no grown-ups. There was nobody on this road. There was just Caleb Turner, 6 years old, who'd been told his whole life that he was worthless and useless and a burden on everyone who had the misfortune of knowing him. He dropped the grocery bag. the bread crushed against the asphalt. One soup can rolled into the ditch. "I'm coming, ma'am," he said. He climbed through the passenger window. Glass bit into his palms and his knees, opening cuts that bled immediately, but he didn't stop. Pain was familiar. Pain was something he understood. He'd had broken bones and cigarette burns and bruises so deep they took weeks to fade. A little glass was nothing. "Don't move your leg," Caleb said. He didn't know where the words came from. Maybe from the time the paramedics came for his mother, and he'd watch from the hallway, invisible, absorbing everything. "I'm gonna stop the bleeding on your head." "Sweetheart, you don't have to." "Yes, ma'am, I do." He found a rag in the glove box, pressed it against the wound on her forehead. The blood soaked through immediately, warm and slick against his small fingers. She winced. He pressed harder. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice was getting weaker. Her eyes kept trying to close. "Caleb. Caleb Turner." "Don't close your eyes, ma'am. Please don't close your eyes." "Dorothy," she said. "My name's Dorothy, but most people call me Dot." "Okay, Miss Dot. I'm gonna call for help. Where's your phone?" "Purse. Floor somewhere." He found it. Cracked screen, but it lit up when he pressed the button. He dialed 911 with fingers that were slippery with blood. His blood, her blood, mixed together on a phone screen on a road where nobody was watching. 911, what's your emergency?" "A lady crashed her truck on County Road 9. She's bleeding real bad from her head and her legs stuck. Please send somebody fast." "How old are you, sweetie?" 6. "But I'm holding the rag on her cut like the ambulance people do. She's awake, but she keeps trying to close her eyes and I won't let her." The dispatcher's voice changed, went from routine to urgent. "You're doing great, honey. Keep pressure on that wound. An ambulance is 12 minutes out. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm not going anywhere." 12 minutes. Caleb held the phone in one hand and the rag against Dorothy's forehead with the other. His arms shook from the effort of pressing hard enough. His knees ached from kneeling on broken glass. Blood had soaked through his shirt, through his jeans, was pooling on the seat beneath him. Dorothy's hand found his. Her grip was weak, but desperate, like a person clutching the edge of a cliff. "You're very brave, Caleb." "I'm not brave, ma'am. I'm just here." "That's the same thing, sweetheart. Most people wouldn't stop. Most people would just keep driving." "I wasn't driving. I was walking." Dorothy almost laughed, but it turned into a cough that flecked her lips with blood. "Walking where?" "Home." "Where's home?" Caleb didn't answer. Home was a word other people used. Home was Dale's trailer, with the meth lab in the back bedroom, and the closet where Caleb slept, and the kitchen where the only food was whatever Caleb could steal or scavenge. That wasn't home. That was a cage. "Caleb, honey, you're bleeding too. Your hands." "I'm okay." "You're not okay. I can see." Dorothy's breath caught. Her eyes focused on something. On the inside of Caleb's wrist, where his sleeve had ridden up, on the 3 perfect circles burned into his skin. "Caleb," he pulled his arm back, tugged the sleeve down. "I fell." Dorothy Garrison had raised a son in the Hells Angels. She'd seen every kind of wound a human body could sustain. She'd patched bullet holes and knife cuts and broken bones held together with duct tape and stubbornness. She knew exactly what cigarette burns looked like. And she knew exactly what a child looked like when he'd been taught to lie about them. "Okay, baby," she whispered. "Okay." But her eyes, those sharp gray-blue eyes, had changed. Something fierce had entered them. Something that had nothing to do with the crash, or the blood, or the pain in her pinned leg. Something maternal and ancient and dangerous. The ambulance arrived. 22 minutes total, not 12, because the dispatcher had given the wrong mile marker and the paramedics had to double back. 22 minutes of a 6-year-old boy holding a stranger's hand, keeping pressure on her wound, talking to her about nothing and everything just to keep her awake. He told her about the cicadas and how they sounded different in August than in July. Told her about a stray cat he'd been feeding behind the Dollar General, a tabby with one ear who let him pet her if he was patient enough. Told her about a book he'd found in a dumpster once, about a boy who sailed to where the wild things were, and how he'd read it 14 times because it was the only book he'd ever owned. "You like to read?" Dorothy asked. "Yes, ma'am, but I don't go to school." "Why not?" "Dale says school is for suckers." "Who's Dale?" Caleb went quiet. The wall came up. Instant, practiced, impenetrable. The paramedics pried Dorothy free, used the jaws of life on the door and a hydraulic spreader on the dashboard, pinning her leg. She screamed when her leg came loose, a sound that made Caleb flinch so hard he bit through his own lip. They loaded her onto a stretcher, started IVs, stabilized her leg, and as they lifted her into the ambulance, Dorothy grabbed Caleb's blood-soaked hand with a grip that shouldn't have been possible for a woman in her condition. "What's your last name again, sweetheart?" "Turner." "Caleb Turner." "Yes, ma'am." Something moved across Dorothy's face, something Caleb couldn't read. Her lips formed a word, but the morphine was hitting, and her eyes were glazing, and whatever she was trying to say dissolved into the fog of painkillers and shock. The ambulance doors closed, the sirens started. Red and white lights painted the trees as the vehicle pulled away, kicking up dust and gravel. Caleb stood alone on County Road 9. His hands were covered in Dorothy's blood. His knees were bleeding through his jeans. The grocery bag lay crushed on the shoulder, bread ruined, one soup can in the ditch. He picked up the surviving can of soup, held it against his chest, and started walking back toward Dale's trailer, back toward the closet and the burns and the silence. He didn't cry. Caleb Turner didn't cry. He'd trained himself not to. Crying was noise, and noise attracted Dale the way blood attracted sharks. But something had cracked inside him during those 22 minutes. Something small and buried and almost dead that had felt a stranger's hand holding his and thought, maybe, just maybe. He killed that thought before it could grow. Hope was the most dangerous thing in the world. Hope got you hurt worse than fists ever could. The trailer sat at the end of a gravel road that the county had stopped maintaining years ago. It was a single wide from the 1980s, white paint gone gray, windows covered with black trash bags, front steps made of cinder blocks. The yard was dirt and weeds and rusted car parts that Dale swore he'd sell someday. Inside smelled like chemicals and stale beer, and something burned that Caleb had learned was the smell of methamphetamine being cooked. Dale was in the back bedroom. The door was closed. The lock was on. That meant he was cooking, which meant Caleb had maybe 2 hours before Dale came out, wired and paranoid and looking for something to hit. Caleb went to his spot, a corner of the living room behind a broken recliner that leaned against the wall at an angle that created a small triangle of space just big enough for a small boy to curl up in. This was his room. This was his world. A threadbare blanket, a toy car missing 2 wheels, and a Polaroid photograph that was the only thing left of his mother. He pulled out the photo. Amber Turner at 18, blonde hair catching sunlight, smiling in a way that Caleb had never seen her smile in real life, because by the time he was old enough to remember faces, the drugs had already stolen her joy. She stood next to a massive motorcycle, her arm around a man, but the man's face was gone, torn away. Someone had ripped the photograph along a jagged line that removed the man from the chest up, leaving just a leather-clad torso and one large hand resting on Amber's hip. Caleb had asked his mother about the man once. She'd been sober that day, sitting on the trailer steps while he played in the dirt. One of her good days, rare as eclipses. "Mama, who's the man in the picture?" Amber had flinched, like the question was a physical blow. "Nobody, baby." "But he's standing right next to you." "He's nobody. He's gone. Don't ask me again." "But," I said, "don't ask me again, Caleb." Her voice had cracked, not with anger, with something worse, with grief so heavy it bent her forward like she was carrying the weight of a life that should have been. It's safer if you don't know. Trust me, it's safer. 3 months later, Amber was dead. Caleb found her on the bathroom floor at 6 a.m., blue-lipped and cold, a needle still in her arm. He sat beside her for 6 hours, held her hand, told her about the stray cat behind the Dollar General, told her it was going to be okay, even though he knew it wasn't, even though he knew nothing would ever be okay again. Dale came home at noon, drunk and stumbling, called 911 like it was an inconvenience, told the social workers he was Caleb's stepfather, told them he'd take care of the boy. The system, overworked and underfunded and willfully blind, believed him. 14 months of Dale, 14 months of fists and burns in the closet and hunger that ate him from the inside out. 14 months of learning that the world was a machine designed to crush small things, and Caleb was the smallest thing of all. He touched the Polaroid now, tracing the torn edge where the man's face should have been. "Mama," he whispered, "I helped a lady today. She crashed her truck and I held her hand and she called me brave." Silence. "I wasn't brave, though. I was just scared she was going to die like you did, and I couldn't watch that again. I can't watch somebody die again, Mama." The back bedroom door unlocked. Footsteps. Heavy. Unsteady. Caleb shoved the photograph under his blanket and made himself small. Smaller than small. A shadow in a corner. A ghost in a room. Nothing to see. Nothing to hit. Dale Scoggins stumbled into the living room. He was 34 but looked 50. Meth had carved him hollow, left him with sunken cheeks and rotting teeth and eyes that darted like trapped animals. He wore a stained tank top and jeans that hung off his skeletal frame. His hands trembled with the chemical jitters that came from sampling his own product. "Where the hell were you?" Dale's voice was a blade. "I told you not to leave this house." "I went to get food," Caleb said, quiet, eyes down. "Food?" Dale spotted the single can of soup in Caleb's hands. "You stole food, again. You trying to get the cops out here?" "Nobody saw me." "You don't know that. You don't know who's watching." Dale's paranoia was cranking up. Caleb could see it in the way his jaw worked, the way his eyes swept the room like it was full of enemies. "Give me that." Dale snatched the soup can. Caleb's last meal for who knew how long, taken in a heartbeat. Dale didn't eat it, didn't even open it, just threw it against the wall, where it dented the drywall and fell to the floor with a sound that made Caleb's stomach clench with a hunger that went beyond food. "You worthless little..." Dale grabbed Caleb's arm, yanked him out from behind the recliner, saw the blood on his shirt, on his hands, on his knees. "The hell happened to you?" "A lady crashed her truck. I helped her." "You what?" "She was bleeding. I called 911. Dale's face went white, then red, then a shade of purple that Caleb had learned to associate with the worst beatings. "You called 911? You brought emergency services to this area? With what's in my back room?" "I wasn't here. I was on County Road 9. They didn't come here." But Dale wasn't listening. Dale was already in the spiral, the meth-fueled tornado of paranoia and rage that turned every minor event into a catastrophe and every person into an enemy. He shoved Caleb against the wall. Caleb's head bounced off the drywall. Stars exploded behind his eyes. "Did they ask your name?" "Just the 911 lady." "Did you tell her where you live?" "No, sir." "You're lying." Dale's hand closed around Caleb's throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was there, the promise. "You're always lying." "I'm not lying, I swear." Dale held him there for 10 seconds, 15, long enough for Caleb's vision to narrow and his lungs to burn. Then he let go. Caleb slid down the wall, gasping. "Get in the closet," Dale said. "Please, now." The closet was 4 feet deep and 3 feet wide. No light, no ventilation. a smell of mildew and old shoes, and the particular darkness that Caleb associated with punishment. Dale shoved him in and locked the door. "You stay in there until I figure out if you've ruined everything." Darkness. Complete. The kind that presses against your eyes and makes you wonder if you've gone blind. Caleb curled into a ball on the floor, knees to chest, arms wrapped around himself. He didn't have the photograph. He'd left it under the blanket. He had nothing. "Mama," he whispered to the dark, "I'm sorry I helped her. I'm sorry." But he wasn't sorry. That was the thing that scared him. He wasn't sorry at all. For 22 minutes, holding Dorothy's hand, he'd felt something he couldn't name. Something warm and electric and terrifying. Something that felt like mattering, like being real instead of invisible, like being a person instead of a ghost. And he wanted to feel it again, even if it cost him everything, even if Dale killed him for it. He wanted to feel it again. Somewhere across Shelby Creek, in the sterile white of a hospital room, Dorothy Garrison was waking up from surgery. Her leg was set. Her head was stitched. Her body was pumped full of painkillers that made the ceiling swim. But her mind was clear, crystal clear. Caleb Turner. She said the name to herself like a prayer, like a key turning in a lock she'd been trying to open for 6 years. Caleb Turner. Amber Turner's boy. Blonde hair, blue eyes, burns on his wrists, bruises on his arms. A 6-year-old who climbed through broken glass to hold a stranger's hand because he couldn't watch someone die. Her son needed to know. Her son, who had torn apart 3 states looking for this boy. Her son, who kept a photograph on his desk of a baby he'd held for 3 weeks before Amber took him and vanished. Her son, who was the president of the Tennessee Hells Angels, and who would ride through hell itself for the people he loved. Dorothy reached for the nurse call button. Her hands were shaking, not from the painkillers, from something much bigger than medicine could touch. "I need a phone," she told the nurse. "I need to call my son." "Ma'am, visiting hours aren't until—" "I don't need visiting hours. I need my son. Now." The nurse saw something in Dorothy's eyes that made argument pointless. She brought a phone. Dorothy dialed the number she'd known by heart for 42 years. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Mama?" Emmett's voice was thick with sleep and fear. He'd gotten the call about the crash 2 hours ago, had been pacing his farmhouse since, waiting for an update, fighting every instinct to ride to the hospital in the middle of the night. "Are you okay?" The doctor said. "I'm fine. Shut up and listen to me." "Mama." "Emmett Garrison, you shut your mouth and you listen to what I'm about to tell you. I found him." Silence on the line. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full. Full of 6 years of searching. 6 years of dead ends. 6 years of a father lying awake at night, wondering if his son was alive, or dead, or hurt, or hungry. "What?" Emmett's voice was barely a whisper. "A boy saved my life tonight. A little boy, 6 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, skinny as a rail, covered in bruises and burns." Dorothy's voice cracked. "His name is Caleb Turner, and he's got your eyes, Emmett. He's got your exact same eyes." The sound that came through the phone wasn't a word. It was something primal, something between a sob and a roar that came from a place so deep it had no name. "Where is he?" Emmett managed. "I don't know exactly. He said he was walking home, County Road 9, outside Shelby Creek." "But Emmett," Dorothy's voice dropped, "that boy is hurt. Not just from helping me. He's hurt in ways that break my heart to think about. Cigarette burns on his wrists, bruises everywhere. He flinched every time I moved my hand. I'll kill whoever. You'll do no such thing. Not yet. You listen to me. You come here in the morning. You bring Grace. You bring your lawyer. And you bring your brothers. Every last one of them. Mama, that boy held my hand for 22 minutes, Emmett. 22 minutes. He pressed a rag against my wound, and he talked to me about cicadas and stray cats and a book about wild things. He's 6 years old and he saved my life, and he's the bravest human being I've ever known." Her voice broke completely. "And he's yours. He's your son, and we are going to bring him home." Emmett Garrison stood in the kitchen of his farmhouse outside Nashville. The phone pressed against his ear, tears running into his beard, his free hand gripping the edge of the counter so hard the wood cracked. His son, alive, hurt, 6 years old and saving strangers on the side of a road because that's the kind of person he was, despite everything the world had done to break him. Emmett made 2 calls. The first was to Grace, his sister. "Get here by morning. Bring everything. Every custody document, every court filing, every piece of evidence we've gathered." "What happened?" "Mama found Caleb." Grace screamed, then cried, then said, "I'll be there in 4 hours." The second call was to Boone Fletcher, his sergeant-at-arms. "Church, emergency, every member, now." "What's happening, brother?" "My son is alive, and he's being hurt, and I need every Hell's Angel in Tennessee ready to ride by sunrise." Boone didn't ask questions, didn't need to. Done. By 3 a.m., 47 Hell's Angels were assembled at the safe house outside Nashville. 47 men and women in leather, in denim, in steel-toed boots, standing in the main room of the farmhouse, waiting for their president to speak. Emmett stood before them. This man who had led them through wars and prison sentences and the kind of darkness that ordinary people couldn't imagine. This man who'd put people in hospitals and served time without complaint and built a reputation that made grown men cross the street. He was crying. "Most of you know the story," he said. "6 years ago, my son was taken from me. Amber ran with him. I've been looking for him every day since. Tonight, my mother found him." He paused, swallowed. "He's 6 years old. He's living with a meth cook named Dale Scoggins in Shelby Creek. He has cigarette burns on his arms. He doesn't go to school. He doesn't have shoes that fit." The room was silent. 47 faces hardened into something beyond anger, something collective and ancient and merciless. "He saved my mother's life tonight, climbed through a wrecked truck and held her hand for 22 minutes. He's 6 and he's braver than any of us." Boone spoke first. "What do you need?" "Everything. I need riders on County Road 9 by morning. I need eyes on Scoggins' trailer. I need Grace here with legal firepower. And I need every one of you ready for whatever comes next." "You got it, brother." "One more thing." Emmett's voice went cold. The tears were gone. The father was still there, but the president was back. The man who made decisions and gave orders and didn't flinch when the world pushed back. "Nobody touches Scoggins until I say so. Nobody rides to that trailer. Nobody does anything that gives the system a reason to take my son further away from me. We do this smart, we do this right, and when it's over, my boy comes home." 47 voices answered as one. "Family." The word echoed off the walls of the farmhouse, bounced off the photographs and the maps and the decades of history that hung in every room. Family, not blood, not biology, not law. Something older and stronger and more dangerous than any of those things. And in a closet in a rotting trailer 30 miles away, Caleb Turner pressed his face against his knees and whispered his mother's name into the darkness and waited for morning the way he always did. Not with hope. Hope was too dangerous, but with something, a flicker, a spark, the memory of an old woman's hand in his, the sound of her voice calling him brave. "Don't close your eyes. Please don't close your eyes." He didn't close his eyes. Not all night. He kept them open in the darkness, staring at nothing, holding on to 22 minutes that had changed everything. He just didn't know it yet. The closet door opened at 5:47 a.m. Caleb knew the time because Dale's microwave clock was visible through the gap when the door swung wide. And Caleb had learned to read digital numbers before he could read words. Because knowing what time it was meant knowing how much danger he was in. Early morning Dale was the worst Dale. The meth had burned through his bloodstream overnight, leaving him jittery and mean and desperate for the next hit that would smooth the edges of a world he couldn't control. "Get up." Dale's boot nudged Caleb's ribs. Not a kick. Not yet. A warning. "We're leaving." Caleb uncurled slowly. His body screamed from a night on the hard floor. His ribs ached where Dale had kicked him yesterday. His hands throbbed where the glass from Dorothy's truck had bitten deep. "Where are we going?" "Don't ask questions, just get in the truck." "Can I get my blanket?" "No." "Can I get my picture?" Dale grabbed Caleb by the back of his shirt and hauled him upright. "I said no, move." Caleb moved. He learned that the distance between Dale's words and Dale's fists was measured in seconds, and arguing cost seconds he couldn't afford. But his heart cracked as they passed the broken recliner where the Polaroid of his mother lay hidden under the threadbare blanket. His only picture, his only proof that Amber Turner had existed, that she'd smiled once, that somebody had loved her enough to stand beside her for a photograph. Dale shoved him toward the front door. The morning air hit Caleb's face, cool and damp with dew, and for 1 second he felt something close to relief just to be out of the closet, out of the chemical stink, breathing air that didn't taste like poison. Then he saw Dale's truck, and the boxes. 3 cardboard boxes in the truck bed, hastily packed, taped shut. The meth lab. Dale was moving his operation, which meant Dale was scared, and scared Dale was the most dangerous Dale of all. "Get in, don't touch anything. Don't say a word." Caleb climbed into the passenger seat. His feet didn't reach the floor. He pulled his knees up to his chest and wrapped his arms around them and made himself as small as physics would allow. Dale started the engine, checked his mirrors 3 times, 4 times, pulled out of the gravel driveway and turned north on Route 7. "Where are we going?" Caleb asked again, because sometimes the fear of not knowing was worse than the punishment for asking. "I told you to shut up." "Are we coming back?" Dale's hands shot across the cab and grabbed Caleb's jaw, squeezed until Caleb's teeth ground together. "One more word. One more word and I'll leave you on the side of the road like your junkie mother should have done the day you were born." He let go. Caleb tasted blood where his cheek had been forced against his teeth. He didn't ask again. He stared out the window and watched Shelby Creek disappear behind them and thought about Dorothy, about her hand in his, about the way she'd said his name like it meant something. Caleb Turner, like it was a real name belonging to a real person instead of just a label attached to a ghost. 200 yards behind Dale's truck, invisible in the pre-dawn gray, Boone Fletcher followed on his motorcycle with his headlight off. His phone was pressed to his ear with one hand, the other steady on the handlebars. "He's running," Boone said, "heading north on Route 7. Got boxes in the truck bed. He's moving his lab." Emmett's voice came back hard and fast. "The boy?" "Passenger seat, alive. But Emmett, he's running scared. This guy's tweaking hard. If he gets on the interstate, we could lose him." "You won't lose him. I'm mobilizing now. Where's Route 7 connect to 40? "About 12 miles north. The Hawkins Creek Junction." "I'll have 20 brothers at Hawkins Creek in 15 minutes. You keep eyes on that truck. Don't let him see you." And Boone, "Yeah, if that truck stops and you hear my son scream, I don't care about warrants. I don't care about custody. You go in. Already planned on it, brother." Emmett hung up and turned to the room. The safe house kitchen was command central now. Maps spread across the table. Phones charging on every surface. Grace sat in the corner, laptop open, dark circles under her eyes, fingers flying across keys as she coordinated with her FBI contact. "Grace, how fast can Reeves move?" "He says the warrants are 90 minutes out, maybe less if the judge." "We don't have 90 minutes. Dale's running with Caleb, heading north." Grace looked up. Her face went pale. "If he crosses the state line with that boy, it becomes a federal kidnapping case. That actually helps us, but my son is in a truck with a meth head who's paranoid and high and has nothing left to lose. Emmett's fist hit the table hard enough to crack the wood. I'm not waiting for warrants. Emmett, Grace stood, crossed to her brother, put her hands on his arms the way their mother used to when Emmett was a boy with too much rage and not enough places to put it. If you assault Dale Scoggins, you go to prison. If you go to prison, you lose Caleb forever. Every judge in Tennessee will say the biker felon can't control himself. Is that what you want? What I want is my son. Then be smart. Be the man Mama raised. Let me work the legal side. Let the FBI work. You work the road. Surround him. Slow him down. Don't let him get on that interstate, but do not touch him. Not yet. Emmett stared at his sister. She was 5 years younger and half his size, and the only person alive who could talk to him like that without consequences. She was also right. He knew she was right. The part of him that was a father screamed to ride to that truck and tear the door off and take his boy. But the part of him that had survived 42 years by thinking before acting, the part that had built the Hells Angels Tennessee chapter into something feared and respected, that part said, wait. 45 minutes, Emmett said. That's what I'll give you. 45 minutes to get those warrants. After that, I'm getting my son. That's all I need. Emmett walked out to the yard where 31 Hells Angels were already mounted on their bikes, engines idling, breath fogging in the cool morning air. He didn't need to give a speech. These men knew. They'd watched him search for 6 years. They'd ridden with him to dead ends and false leads and moments of hope that turned to ash. They knew what today meant. Route 7, northbound, Emmett said. Blue Chevy truck. My son is in the passenger seat. We box him in. We slow him down. Nobody touches the driver until I say. 31 engines roared to life. The sounds shook the trees and sent birds scattering into the gray sky. They rode out in formation, a wall of chrome and leather pouring onto the highway like a river finding its course. Back on Route 7, Dale was unraveling. His hands shook on the steering wheel. His eyes darted between the road and the mirrors, and the road again, seeing threats in every shadow, every distant headlight, every bird that crossed the sky. The meth was eating him alive from the inside, and the paranoia that came with it turned the world into a conspiracy with Dale Scoggins at its center. That old woman, Dale muttered. That old woman you helped. Who was she? Caleb didn't answer. Dale had told him not to talk. I'm asking you a question, boy. Who was she? I don't know. Just a lady. Just a lady. Just a lady who crashed on our road, right near our house. You think that's a coincidence? She hit a deer. Nobody hits a deer in August. Deer don't cross roads in August. Dale's logic was meth logic, which meant no logic at all. But Caleb knew better than to argue with it. Somebody sent her. Somebody's watching us. That 911 call, they traced it. They know where we live. I didn't tell them. Shut up. Dale jerked the wheel, swerving around a slow-moving truck. Caleb braced against the door, his small body thrown sideways. We're going to Kentucky. I know a guy in Bowling Green. We lay low for a month, maybe 2. Then we figure out what's next. Kentucky, a new state, a new trailer, a new closet. The same darkness with different walls. Caleb pressed his forehead against the window and closed his eyes. He thought about Dorothy, about her gray-blue eyes and her weathered hands, and the way she'd called him her hero. He thought about the words she'd mouthed as the ambulance doors closed, the word he couldn't hear but somehow felt. And then he thought about something else, something small that had been nagging at him since the hospital. When Dorothy had looked at him, really looked at him, her expression had changed. Not just concern, not just kindness, something deeper, something that looked almost like she recognized him. But that was impossible. He'd never met her before. Had he? The first motorcycle appeared in Dale's rearview mirror at 6:22 a.m. Dale saw it, stiffened. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The hell? A second bike appeared, then a third. Then 4 more spread across the lane behind them like a metal curtain being drawn. Dale? Caleb had turned to look through the rear window. There's motorcycles. I can see that. Dale's voice had gone high and thin. The voice of a man watching his worst paranoid fantasy materialize in real time. How many? I can't count them all. Dale checked his mirror again. The bikes were multiplying. 8, 12, 15. They weren't racing, weren't aggressive. They were just there, present, following at a steady 60 miles an hour, maintaining distance but making their existence impossible to ignore. This is about the old woman, Dale whispered. This is about the damn old woman. He floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, speedometer climbing toward 80. Caleb grabbed the dashboard. Dale, slow down. Shut up. You're going too fast. I said shut up. Dale backhanded Caleb across the face without taking his eyes off the road. Caleb's head snapped sideways. Blood filled his mouth. Stars danced behind his eyes. But he didn't cry out. Never cry out. The bikes matched their speed, effortless, like they'd expected it. And now new bikes were appearing. Not behind them, beside them. Motorcycles merging onto Route 7 from side roads and farm tracks, falling into formation alongside the truck, 1 on the left shoulder, 2 on the right, more joining every minute. Dale was surrounded. He just didn't know it yet. At the Hawkins Creek Junction, 16 more Hells Angels were waiting. They sat in a line across the entrance ramp to Interstate 40, engines off, arms crossed, blocking the on-ramp like a human barricade. Dale saw them and slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed on the damp road. Caleb was thrown forward, his forehead cracking against the dashboard. More blood, more stars. But the seatbelt caught him, held him, the only thing in Dale's truck that had ever protected him. No, 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 no. Dale was muttering, hands shaking, eyes wild. He cranked the wheel left, tried to take a side road. 3 motorcycles were already there, idling in a V formation that left no room to pass. He tried right, more bikes. He tried to reverse. The wall of motorcycles behind him had closed to within 20 feet, a solid line of chrome and leather, and faces that held no mercy. Dale Scoggins was in a box made of 47 Hells Angels who had ridden through the dawn for a boy they'd never met, because their president's son was in danger, and family meant something in this world, even when the world tried to pretend it didn't. The bikes began to slow, all of them, gradually, steadily like a tide going out. Dale had no choice but to slow with them. His speedometer dropped, 60, 50, 40, 30. The formation guided the truck, gently, inevitably, toward the parking lot of an abandoned gas station at the Hawkins Creek Junction. The pumps were gone. The windows were boarded. The sign was rusted beyond reading. The bikes circled the lot, engines cut. 47 riders dismounted in unison, and the silence that followed was louder than any engine. Dale's breathing was ragged, shallow. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles looked like they might burst through the skin. Caleb sat perfectly still beside him, blood trickling from his forehead, watching the bikers through the windshield with an expression that wasn't fear. It was wonder. He'd never seen so many people in one place, never seen so many faces turned toward him, not through him, not past him, not looking at the space he occupied like it was empty, at him, like he was real, like he was visible, like he mattered. One man separated from the group, bigger than the rest, brown hair going gray at the temples, a beard that looked like it had been growing for decades, shoulders that could carry the weight of a world. He walked toward the truck with the slow, measured steps of a man who had all the time in the universe, but not a second to waste. Emmett Garrison stopped at the driver's door, looked at Dale through the glass. Dale wouldn't meet his eyes. "Open the door," Emmett said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it more terrifying than any shout. "I'm calling the cops." Dale fumbled for his phone. "This is kidnapping. This is assault. I'll have every one of you. You're going to call Sheriff Wheeler? The sheriff who's been taking payoffs from your supplier for the last 10 years? That's who you're going to call? Dale's phone hand froze. Yeah, Emmett said. We know about Wheeler. We know about Victor Cross. We know about the lab in your back bedroom and the product in those boxes and every dollar you've moved through that trailer for the last 3 years. So go ahead, call your sheriff. See how fast he comes when he finds out the FBI already has his name. The phone dropped from Dale's hand, clattered to the floor between his feet. Open the door, Dale. Dale's eyes finally moved to Caleb, not with concern, not with anything resembling love, or even recognition that the boy beside him was a human being. It was the look of a man calculating the value of his leverage. This kid's mine, Dale said. Legal custody, you can't take him. Emmett's jaw clenched so hard the muscles jumped visibly. He's not yours. He was never yours. You know it. I know it. And in about 20 minutes, a federal judge is going to know it too. You're bluffing. Open the door and find out. Dale sat there for 10 seconds. 15. The longest 15 seconds of Caleb's life. The boy could feel the tension radiating off Dale like heat from a stove. Could feel the calculation happening behind those twitching, meth-ravaged eyes. Fight or surrender. Gamble or fold. Dale opened the door. He stepped out with his hands half raised, that universal gesture of a man who knows he's beaten, but wants everyone to think he chose to stop. Emmett didn't look at him, didn't give him the satisfaction of a single second of attention. Emmett walked around to the passenger side, opened the door, and saw his son for the second time in his life. The first time, Caleb had been 3 weeks old, pink and wrinkled and impossibly small, with a cry that could shatter glass and a grip on Emmett's finger that felt like a promise. Emmett had held him in the hospital and thought, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. Now his son was 6, and he was bleeding from a gash on his forehead where he'd hit the dashboard, and his eye was swollen nearly shut from Dale's backhand, and his arms, thin as broomsticks, were mapped with bruises and burns that told a story Emmett would spend the rest of his life trying to untell. Hey, buddy. Same whisper as the hospital, same crouch, bringing himself low, making himself small, because Emmett Garrison understood that to this child, big men meant pain. Remember me? From the hospital? Your grandma's son? Caleb nodded. His bottom lip trembled. The wall was cracking. The wall that had kept him alive for 6 years, that had turned off the tears and swallowed the screams and made him into a ghost who could survive anything because ghosts don't feel pain. It was cracking, and what was behind it was a 6-year-old boy who wanted his father. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore, Emmett said. I promise. You can't promise that. Caleb's voice was tiny, steady, the voice of a child who'd heard promises before and learned what they were worth. Everybody says that and nobody means it. I mean it. How do I know? Emmett reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a photograph. Not laminated, not preserved. Worn soft from 6 years of handling, of being held late at night, of being pressed against a father's chest while he prayed to a God he wasn't sure existed. He held it up so Caleb could see. It was Amber, young Amber, 18-year-old Amber, smiling in the sunshine with her arm around a man standing beside a motorcycle. The same photograph Caleb had under his blanket in Dale's trailer. But this one was complete. This one wasn't torn, and the man beside Amber was Emmett. Caleb stared at the photo. His eyes moved from the picture to Emmett's face and back again, comparing, recognizing. The same jaw, the same eyes, the same way of standing, solid and rooted, like a tree that refused to bend. That's you, Caleb whispered. You're the man in Mama's picture. Yeah, buddy, that's me. Somebody tore you out. Your mama tore it. She was trying to protect you, trying to keep you hidden from people who might hurt you. She couldn't protect me from Dale. The words hit Emmett like a sledgehammer. His eyes closed. His hands, which had broken jaws and rebuilt engines, and held his dying father's hand, those hands trembled. No, he said. She couldn't. And I couldn't either. I looked for you, Caleb. For 6 years, I looked. I never stopped. Why? Because you're my son. The word hit the space between them and detonated. Son. Father. The two most loaded words in the English language, carrying 6 years of absence and longing and failure and hope. Caleb's wall broke. It didn't crack or crumble. It shattered. All at once, like Dorothy's windshield on County Road 9, splintering into 1,000 pieces that could never be put back together. His face twisted, his body convulsed, and a sound came out of him that made 47 Hell's Angels look away because it was too raw, too pure, too private to witness. He reached for Emmett. Small arms, bruised and burned and bleeding, reached for a stranger who wasn't a stranger. Reached for the man in the torn photograph. Reached for the shape that had been missing from his life since before he could remember. Emmett caught him, gathered him, pressed his son against his chest, and held him with the desperate gentleness of a man who'd been given a second chance he didn't deserve and would die before wasting it. I got you, Emmett whispered. I got you, buddy. I'm here. I'm right here. Caleb sobbed into his father's leather vest. Real sobs, the kind he hadn't allowed himself since the day he found his mother's body. 6 years of tears, stored and suppressed and denied, flooding out of him in waves that shook his entire frame. Don't let him take me back, Caleb choked. Please, please don't let him take me back to the closet. Emmett's arms tightened. His eyes, streaming, found Dale Scoggins standing between two Hell's Angels who'd positioned themselves as guards. Dale was shaking, sweating, looking at the ground. The closet? Emmett's voice was barely human. You kept my son in a closet? Dale said nothing. Look at me. Dale looked up. What he saw in Emmett Garrison's face made his bladder release for the second time that morning. Because the man holding the crying child was gone, what stood in his place was something older and darker and more certain than anything Dale had ever encountered in a life built on cruelty and cowardice. You're going to prison, Emmett said, and every day you're there, every single day for the rest of your miserable life, you're going to remember the sound of my son crying. That's your punishment. Not what I could do to you right now. Not what every man here wants to do to you, but knowing what you did to a child and living with it. Boone stepped forward. Brother, FBI's 3 minutes out. Grace just confirmed. Emmett didn't move, didn't let go of Caleb, didn't break eye contact with Dale. Good. Also, Mama called. She wants to talk to the boy. Emmett pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker and held it near Caleb's ear. Caleb? Sweetheart, it's Grandma Dot. Caleb's sobs hitched. He pulled his face from Emmett's chest just enough to speak. Miss Dot? It's Grandma Dot, honey. Can you say that for me? Grandma Dot. His voice cracked on both words. That's my brave boy. Listen to me. You're safe now. The man holding you is my son, and he's your daddy, and he's been looking for you since the day you were born. You're safe. Nobody's ever going to lock you in a dark room again. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. And Caleb? Yes, ma'am. When you get to the hospital, I've got pancakes waiting. Real ones. Not the frozen kind. The kind I make from scratch with chocolate chips. Through the tears, through the blood and the bruises and the wreckage of everything he'd survived, Caleb Turner smiled. Small, fragile, the most tentative expression of joy imaginable, but real. The first sirens cut through the morning air exactly 2 minutes and 40 seconds later. FBI SUVs poured into the parking lot from both directions, followed by 2 Tennessee Bureau of Investigation cruisers. Agent Tom Reeves stepped out of the lead vehicle with a warrant in one hand and a gun on his hip and the expression of a man who'd been building this case for 3 years and finally had everything he needed to finish it. Dale Scoggins? Reeves held up the warrant. Federal agents, you're under arrest for the manufacture and distribution of methamphetamine, child endangerment, and child abuse. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Dale turned. Dale complied. Because Dale Scoggins had been a coward his entire life, and cowards always fold when the odds shift. Reeves cuffed him, read his rights, handed him off to 2 agents who loaded him into the back of an SUV without ceremony. Then Reeves walked over to Emmett, looked at Caleb, still pressed against his father's chest, looked at the blood on the boy's face, the swelling around his eye, the burns visible on his wrists. That the boy? That's my son. Reeves nodded, professional, controlled, but something human flickered behind his federal agent mask. He needs a hospital. We'll need his statement, but it can wait. Get him looked at first. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Reeves lowered his voice. Sheriff Wheeler's going to know about this within the hour. He'll try to intervene, claim jurisdiction, maybe try to take the boy into county custody. Let him try. Reeves looked at the 47 Hells Angels standing in formation behind Emmett. 47 men and women who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't done anything illegal. They'd simply existed, simply stood there. A wall of family between a boy and the world that had been hurting him. Something tells me he won't get very far, Reeves said. Emmett carried Caleb to the van. Boone drove. Grace sat in the back with Emmett and the boy, already on her phone with the family court emergency line, filing motions, citing statutes, building the legal fortress that would protect Caleb from every Dale Scoggins and Buck Wheeler the world could throw at him. Caleb hadn't let go of Emmett's vest. His small fingers were knotted in the leather, gripping so tight his knuckles were white, like he was holding onto the edge of a cliff, and the fall below was everything he'd ever known. Dad? The word came out hoarse, experimental, like he was testing it, tasting it, seeing if it fit in his mouth. Emmett's breath caught. Yeah, buddy. Am I really your son? You're really my son. How come you didn't come sooner? The question was a knife, clean and precise, sliding between Emmett's ribs and finding the wound that had never healed. He closed his eyes, breathed, let the pain be what it was without trying to dress it up or explain it away. Your mama ran, Emmett said. She took you and she hid because she thought hiding was the only way to keep you safe. And by the time I found out where you were, she was already gone, and the people who should have been protecting you were the ones hurting you. I tried the legal way, lawyers and courts and judges. It was too slow. Everything's always too slow when you're in the closet, Caleb said. Grace made a sound, a small, strangled gasp that she covered with her hand and turned away so the boy wouldn't see her face crumble. Because that sentence, spoken in the matter-of-fact voice of a child who had normalized his own torture, was the worst thing she'd ever heard. You're never going back to that closet, Emmett said. You're never going back to that trailer. You're never going to be hungry or cold or scared again. Not while I'm breathing. People always say that. I'm not people. I'm your dad. Caleb looked at him, studied him with the ancient, weary gaze of a child who'd been betrayed by every adult he'd ever trusted. Searching for the lie, searching for the angle, searching for the moment when this stranger's kindness would curdle into cruelty like it always did. He didn't find it. Something in Emmett's face, in his eyes, in the way he held Caleb like he was made of glass and gold, and everything worth protecting, something broke through the last of the boy's defenses. Not all the way. Trust that broken takes years to rebuild, and Caleb was smart enough to know that even at 6. But enough. A crack in the door. A sliver of light in the closet. Okay, Caleb whispered. Okay, Dad. And Emmett Garrison, president of the Tennessee Hells Angels, a man who had survived prison and bullets and the kind of grief that makes lesser men put guns in their mouths, buried his face in his son's dirty blonde hair, and wept like the broken, grateful, terrified father he was. Behind them, 47 motorcycles followed the van towards Shelby Creek Memorial Hospital. A convoy of chrome and leather and stubborn, ferocious love cutting through the Tennessee morning like a blade through everything the world had built to keep a father from his son. And in the hospital, in room 7, Dorothy Garrison was already making pancake batter with supplies she'd bullied the cafeteria staff into providing, because her grandson was coming home and he was going to eat a real breakfast for the first time in his life. And God help anyone, nurse or doctor or the devil himself, who tried to stop her. The pancakes were burning. Dorothy smelled it before the smoke alarm caught it, and she lunged for the electric griddle she'd commandeered from the hospital cafeteria with nothing but stubbornness and a glare that had made the head cook back up 3 steps. Her fractured legs screamed in protest. The IV line yanked against her wrist. She didn't care. Her grandson was coming, and she'd promised chocolate chip pancakes, and Dorothy Garrison had never broken a promise in 72 years of living, and she wasn't about to start now. "Mrs. Garrison, you need to get back in bed." The nurse, a young woman named Patty, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and the expression of someone who'd lost this battle 3 times already. "I need to finish these pancakes. You had surgery 14 hours ago, and I'll have surgery again if I have to, but right now I'm making breakfast for my grandson." Dorothy flipped the pancake with a spatula she'd stolen from the cafeteria drawer. Golden brown. Perfect. The chocolate chips had melted into little pools of sweetness that reminded her of the pancakes she used to make for Emmett when he was small, before the world hardened him into something the world feared. "How many 6-year-olds do you know who've never had a homemade pancake, Patty?" Patty's expression softened. She'd read Caleb's intake file. She knew what was coming through those doors. "None." "Exactly, so either help me or get out of my way." Patty helped. They heard the convoy before they saw it. That deep, rolling thunder that made the hospital windows vibrate and the water in the bedside pitcher tremble. 47 Hell's Angels pulling into the parking lot of Shelby Creek Memorial, one after another, until the lot was full and bikes lined the access road, and the security guard at the front entrance picked up his radio with shaking hands. Dorothy heard it from her room, put down the spatula, pressed both hands against her chest like she was trying to hold her heart inside her body. "He's here," she whispered. "My boy's bringing him home." Emmett carried Caleb through the emergency entrance, not because Caleb couldn't walk, because Caleb wouldn't let go. His arms were locked around Emmett's neck, his face buried against his father's shoulder, his fingers knotted in the leather vest so tight that the patches were creasing. He weighed nothing. 41 pounds, the doctor would say later. 41 pounds at 6 years old, when he should have weighed at least 48. 7 pounds of meals that never came, of nutrition stolen by neglect, of a body that had learned to survive on less because less was all it ever got. "I need a doctor," Emmett told the intake nurse. His voice was controlled, but his eyes gave him away. Red-rimmed, wild, the eyes of a man holding his worst nightmare in his arms and trying not to shatter. "My son's been hurt." The nurse looked at Caleb, at the blood on his forehead, the swollen eye, the bruises visible above his collar. She didn't ask questions. She paged the pediatric team and had them in an exam room in under 90 seconds. Dr. Sarah Chen was 38, small, precise, and had spent 12 years treating children in rural Tennessee. She'd seen abuse before. She documented it, reported it, testified about it in courtrooms where men in suits argued about what constituted reasonable discipline, while children sat in hallways waiting to learn who would hurt them next. But Caleb Turner made her stop. She stood in the exam room doorway and watched Emmett try to set his son on the examination table. And she watched Caleb's fingers tighten on the leather vest. And she heard the sound the boy made. Not a scream, not a cry, but a whimper so small and so animal that it bypassed her professional training and hit her directly in the part of her brain that was simply human. "It's okay, buddy," Emmett was saying. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving. I just need you to sit on the table so the doctor can look at you." "Don't go." "I'm not going. I'm standing right here, see? Right here." Caleb loosened his grip, one finger at a time, like peeling a bandage off a wound that hadn't healed. He sat on the table, legs dangling, feet not even close to reaching the floor. His eyes tracked Emmett with the intensity of a child who'd learned that people disappear when you stop watching them. "Hi, Caleb." Dr. Chen kept her voice soft, moved slowly, telegraphed every motion. "I'm Dr. Chen. I'm going to take a look at you, okay? I'll tell you everything I'm doing before I do it. And if you want me to stop, you just say stop. Deal?" Caleb looked at Emmett. Emmett nodded. "Deal," Caleb said. The examination took 45 minutes. 45 minutes that aged Emmett Garrison 10 years. Every time Dr. Chen found something new, she'd make a small note on her clipboard, and Emmett would watch her pen move and know that each stroke was another mark on the ledger of what Dale Scoggins had done to his child. 14 cigarette burns. Various stages of healing. The oldest were at least a year old, faded to pale circles. The newest was less than a week old, still raw and red on the inside of Caleb's right forearm. A healed fracture in his left radius, never set properly. The bone had knit itself back together at a slight angle, which meant Caleb's left arm would always be a little crooked, a permanent reminder written in bone of a break that nobody bothered to treat. 3 cracked ribs, recent, probably from the kicks Caleb had described in the closet. Malnutrition, growth delay, anemia, vitamin deficiencies so severe that Dr. Chen ordered immediate supplementation, and a nutritional plan that she wrote with hands that trembled slightly, because the clinical terms on her clipboard translated to something very simple. This child had been starving. "Mr. Garrison," Dr. Chen stepped into the hallway where Emmett was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, fists clenched at his sides. "Can I speak with you?" "Tell me." "There's one more thing," Dr. Chen lowered her voice. "I'm a mandatory reporter. I've already filed with CPS. There will be an investigation. They'll want to interview Caleb, verify your custody claim, inspect your home. It's going to be invasive, and it's going to feel like you're being treated like a criminal when you're the one trying to save him. I'm sorry about that. I don't care about invasive. I care about keeping my son. Then get a good lawyer, the best you can find." Dr. Chen glanced back toward the exam room where Caleb sat on the table, small and still, watching the door. "That boy in there deserves the best. After what he's been through, he deserves the absolute best." Emmett walked back into the room. Caleb's eyes locked onto him immediately, that desperate tracking gaze that wouldn't relax for months. "Hey, buddy, Grandma Dot's got pancakes. You hungry?" She really made pancakes? Chocolate chip, from scratch, the ghost of a smile, fragile as a soap bubble. "Can we go now?" We can go now. Dorothy's room had been transformed. She'd somehow acquired a folding table, covered it with a clean white sheet, set it with hospital cafeteria plates and plastic utensils, and arranged a stack of pancakes in the center that steamed and smelled like everything good that had ever existed in the world. A plastic cup of orange juice stood next to each plate. She'd even found a small vase and put a single flower in it, a daisy from the arrangement in the hospital lobby, swiped when the receptionist wasn't looking. Caleb stopped in the doorway, stared at the table, at the pancakes, at Dorothy, who sat in her wheelchair with her fractured leg propped up, and her silver hair combed, and her gray-blue eyes shining with tears she was too stubborn to let fall. "There he is," Dorothy said. "There's my hero. Come sit down, baby. Eat while they're hot." Caleb sat. He looked at the pancakes like they might be a trap, like someone might snatch them away, like this was a test and the wrong answer meant the closet. "Go ahead, sweetheart, they're yours." He picked up the fork, cut a piece, put it in his mouth, and his eyes went wide. Actually, wide. Like he'd discovered something miraculous, something he didn't know existed, something that changed the fundamental rules of how the world worked. Good? Dorothy asked. Caleb nodded, couldn't speak. His mouth was full and his eyes were full, and he was eating with the focused intensity of a child who'd learned to consume food as fast as possible because you never knew when it would be taken away. Slow down, honey. Nobody's taking them. There's more batter. I'll make you 10 more if you want. 10? 20? 100? However many it takes. Caleb slowed down, chewed, tasted, and somewhere between the third bite and the fourth, a tear rolled down his cheek and landed on the plate, and he wiped it away with the back of his hand and kept eating like nothing had happened, because Caleb Turner didn't cry. Except he was. And nobody pretended they didn't see it, and nobody told him to stop, and nobody punished him for showing weakness. Emmett sat beside his son and ate pancakes and watched the boy who'd saved his mother's life discover what chocolate tasted like when it was given with love instead of withheld as punishment. Dorothy watched them both, father and son, the same jaw, the same eyes, the same stubborn set to the shoulders that said, "I'm here and I'm not leaving, and you'll have to kill me to change that." "He looks like you," Dorothy said softly. "He looks like Amber. He looks like both of you. That's how it works." The moment broke at 9:47 a.m. Boone appeared in the doorway. His face was wrong. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by something tight and urgent. "Emmett, we got a problem." Emmett was on his feet before Boone finished the sentence. "What?" "Sheriff Wheeler just pulled into the parking lot. 6 cruisers. He's demanding to see the boy. Says he's got a court order for immediate protective custody." "From who? What judge?" "Judge Harold Banks, Shelby Creek County." Grace, who'd been making calls in the hallway, appeared behind Boone. "Banks is on Victor Cross's payroll. Has been for 5 years. Any order he signed isn't worth the paper it's printed on. But Wheeler doesn't care about legality. He cares about getting Caleb before the FBI can establish federal jurisdiction." "They can't take him." Emmett's voice dropped to something primal, something that came from a place below language, below reason, below anything civilized. "Grace, tell me they can't take him." "Not if we play this right. I've already called Reeves. Federal agents are 20 minutes out. If we can stall Wheeler for 20 minutes, the feds will supersede his county order." "And if we can't stall him?" Grace didn't answer. She didn't have to. Emmett looked back into the room. Caleb was still eating, still chewing slowly the way Dorothy had taught him, still alive in a way that he hadn't been 12 hours ago. And now a corrupt sheriff was walking through the front door of this hospital with a piece of paper signed by a corrupt judge, coming to take Emmett's son and hand him back to the system that had been destroying him. "Boone, get the brothers inside." "Emmett." "Not for a fight, for a wall. I want every Hell's Angel in this hospital standing between that sheriff and this room. Nobody touches anyone. Nobody throws a punch. But nobody moves. Not 1 inch." Boone nodded, disappeared. Within 3 minutes, 47 Hell's Angels had entered Shelby Creek Memorial Hospital through every available entrance and positioned themselves in the hallway outside Dorothy's room. They stood shoulder to shoulder, leather to leather, a human barricade that stretched from one end of the corridor to the other. Nurses stopped in their tracks. Patients peeked from doorways. The security guard took one look and called his supervisor, who took one look and called the hospital administrator, who took one look and decided this was above her pay grade. Sheriff Buck Wheeler appeared at the far end of the hallway with 6 deputies. He was exactly what Emmett expected. Mid-50s, thick through the middle, a face that wore authority like a mask over something rotten. His badge was polished. His gun was holstered. His smile was the kind that preceded the worst kind of cruelty, the legal kind. The kind that came with paperwork and procedures and the full weight of a system designed to crush people who couldn't fight back. Emmett Garrison, Wheeler's voice carried down the hallway. Professional, controlled. The voice of a man who'd done this before and expected to do it again. I have a court order signed by Judge Harold Banks for the immediate protective custody of the minor child Caleb Turner. Step aside. No, that's not a request. And that's not a legitimate court order. Wheeler's smile didn't waver. I don't need your legal opinion, Garrison. I need you to produce the child, now, or I arrest every person in this hallway for obstruction. Then start arresting. Emmett stepped forward, not aggressive, not threatening, just present, because nobody in this hallway is moving. Wheeler's eyes swept the 47 bikers blocking his path, calculated the odds, adjusted his approach. You're making a mistake. I'm trying to protect this boy. You're trying to hand him back to the man who burned him with cigarettes. Something flickered in Wheeler's eyes, just for a fraction of a second. A flinch so small that only someone watching for it would catch it. But Emmett caught it, and he knew. You knew, Emmett said. His voice changed, went cold. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop. You knew what Dale was doing to him. You knew about the burns and the beatings in the closet, and you did nothing. That's a serious accusation. That's a fact. Dale Scoggins has been cooking meth in that trailer for 3 years, and you've been looking the other way because Victor Cross pays you to look the other way. And my son was collateral damage. An invisible kid in an invisible trailer that nobody bothered to check on because checking would have meant admitting what you already knew. Wheeler's jaw tightened. You have no proof of any of that. I don't need proof. The FBI does. And they're about 15 minutes from walking through that door with enough evidence to end your career, your freedom, and every dirty deal you've made since you pinned that badge on. You're bluffing. Grace stepped out from behind Emmett, held up her phone. Agent Tom Reeves, FBI Financial Crimes and Public Corruption Unit. He's on his way. Would you like to speak with him, Sheriff? He's very interested in discussing your relationship with Victor Cross. Wheeler's face changed. The smile vanished. The professional mask cracked. What was underneath was panic. Raw, animal panic. The kind that comes when a man who's been building a house of cards feels the first card shift. You don't know what you're getting into, Wheeler said. His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. Cross has people everywhere. Judges, prosecutors, state police. You think one FBI agent is going to change anything? I think one FBI agent with 14 months of financial records, 3 cooperating witnesses, and a 6-year-old boy covered in cigarette burns is going to change everything, Grace said. Deputy Phelps. Wheeler turned to his youngest officer. Secure the hallway. Remove these civilians by force if necessary. Phelps didn't move. Phelps, I gave you an order. Sir. Phelps was 26, 3 years on the force. He'd taken this job because he believed in it, because his father had been a cop, because he thought the badge meant something. He was looking at Caleb's medical file, which Grace had handed him 30 seconds ago, looking at the photographs Dr. Chen had taken, looking at 14 cigarette burns and a crooked arm that had never been set, and ribs that had been cracked by a man who was supposed to be protecting him. I'm not removing anyone. That's an order, Deputy. Then fire me. Phelps unclipped his badge, held it out. I signed up to protect people, Sheriff, not to hand children back to the men who hurt them. Wheeler stared at the badge, at Phelps, at the wall of bikers who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't done anything except stand there and refuse to step aside. You're all going to regret this, Wheeler said. I already regret plenty, Emmett replied. Missing 6 years of my son's life. Trusting people like you to keep him safe. Those are my regrets. What's happening in this hallway right now isn't one of them. Behind them, from inside Dorothy's room, a small voice cut through the tension like a blade through smoke. Dad? Emmett turned. Caleb was standing in the doorway, syrup on his chin, a half-eaten pancake in his hand. His eyes, those blue eyes that were Emmett's eyes, were wide and scared and locked on the sheriff with an expression that made every person in that hallway understand exactly what they were fighting for. "It's okay, buddy. Go back inside with Grandma. Is the policeman going to take me away?" The question hung in the air. 47 bikers stiffened. 6 deputies shifted uncomfortably. Wheeler's hand moved toward his sidearm, a reflexive gesture that he caught and stopped, but not before every eye in the hallway registered the movement. "Nobody is taking you anywhere," Emmett said. "I promise." "Dale said the police were his friends. Dale said they'd always bring me back." The words landed like grenades. One of Wheeler's deputies, a woman named Torres, who'd been silent until now, turned to look at her sheriff with an expression that was part horror and part understanding. The kind of understanding that comes when the last piece of a puzzle you've been trying not to solve clicks into place. "Sheriff," Torres said quietly, "we should go. We're not going anywhere until—" "Sir," Torres stepped closer, lowered her voice, but not low enough, not nearly low enough. "That boy just said the police bring him back to his abuser. If we force entry into that room and take him, and the FBI gets here and finds out what we did, every one of us goes down. Not just you, all of us." Wheeler's face went through a series of expressions: rage, calculation, fear, and finally the cold, practical acceptance of a man who knew when to cut his losses. "This isn't over, Garrison." "No," Emmett agreed, "it isn't." Wheeler turned, walked back down the hallway. His deputies followed. Phelps stayed behind, his badge still in his hand, his career in ruins, his conscience clear. "For what it's worth," Phelps said to Emmett, "I didn't know. About the boy, about what Scoggins was doing. I should have looked harder. I should have questioned more. I'm sorry. You stood up when it mattered. That counts for something." Phelps nodded, looked at Caleb. "Hey, little man, those pancakes look pretty good." Caleb studied the ex-deputy for a long moment, measuring, judging. Then he held out the half-eaten pancake. "You want some? Grandma Dot made them. They have chocolate." Phelps smiled. A real one. The kind that comes from a place that badges and uniforms can't touch. "I'd love some. Thank you." Grace pulled Emmett aside while Caleb returned to Dorothy's room with Phelps trailing behind. "Wheeler's not done. He's going to call Cross. Cross is going to send lawyers, maybe worse." "How long until Reeves gets here?" 8 minutes. Then we hold for 8 minutes. "Emmett," Grace grabbed his arm, "there's something else. Reeves told me on the phone. Victor Cross isn't just a drug distributor. He's connected to a child trafficking pipeline that moves through rural Tennessee. The meth operation is the front. The real money is in moving kids." The words hit Emmett like a physical blow. His vision narrowed. His hearing went sharp. Every sound in the hallway compressed into a single, clear frequency. "Kids," he repeated. "Reeves has been tracking it for 3 years. That's why Dale kept Caleb. Not because he cared about him. Because a child in the house is cover. And if things got bad enough, if Cross needed leverage or product—" "Don't finish that sentence." "Emmett, I said don't finish it." His hands were shaking. Not with fear, with something beyond rage, beyond fury, something that had no name in English or any other language. The understanding that his son hadn't just been abused. His son had been a commodity, an asset in a ledger. A small blonde boy in a trailer who existed, in the eyes of the men who controlled his life, not as a person, but as inventory. "Reeves needs Caleb's testimony," Grace said. "Not just about Dale, about everything. Who came to the trailer, what he saw, what he heard. That boy may be the key witness in the biggest trafficking case in Tennessee history. He's 6 years old. I know. He's been through enough. I know that too. But if we don't stop Cross, there are other kids, other trailers, other closets. Emmett closed his eyes, pressed his palms against his face, breathed. In the room behind him, he could hear Dorothy laughing at something Caleb had said, could hear his son's voice, tentative and soft, telling Phelps about the stray cat behind the Dollar General. Normal sounds, good sounds, the sounds of a boy learning what it felt like to be safe. And now the world wanted to use him again. Differently, for a better reason, but use him nonetheless. Not today, Emmett said. Today he eats pancakes. Today he meets his family. Today he's a kid. Tomorrow we figure out how to save the world, but today is his. Grace nodded, squeezed his arm. Okay, today is his. Agent Reeves arrived at 10:31 a.m. 2 black SUVs, 4 agents, federal jurisdiction that superseded everything Sheriff Wheeler had tried to do. Reeves took one look at the 47 bikers in the hallway and raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Where's Wheeler?" Reeves asked. "Gone," Grace said, "but he'll be back. He's scared, and scared men do stupid things." "He won't be doing anything for much longer." Reeves pulled out his phone, showed Grace a text. "Judge Banks's order has been vacated. Federal protective custody has been established for the minor child, Caleb Turner. Your brother has been named temporary guardian pending a full custody hearing." "When?" "We fast-tracked it. Hearing is in 2 days. Judge Harriet Monroe, Nashville." "Monroe's clean?" "Monroe's a pit bull who eats corrupt officials for breakfast. She's been waiting for a case like this." Reeves looked toward Dorothy's room. "How's the boy?" "Eating pancakes with his grandmother." Something human crossed Reeves' federal agent face. A softening, a crack in the professional armor. "Good. He's going to need a lot more pancakes before this is over." Inside the room, Caleb had eaten 4 pancakes. A personal record for a boy who usually measured meals in handfuls and scraps. His stomach was full for the first time in as long as he could remember, and the sensation was so foreign that it made him sleepy, his eyelids drooping, his body relaxing in a way it hadn't relaxed in months. Dorothy noticed. "Come here, sweetheart." Caleb climbed into her wheelchair, carefully avoiding her fractured leg, finding a spot against her chest where his head fit perfectly, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Dorothy's arms wrapped around him. Gentle, warm. The arms of a woman who'd spent 72 years learning how to hold people without breaking them. "Grandma Dot?" "Yes, baby." "The man at the hospital, the policeman who wanted to take me, is he going to come back?" "Maybe, but your daddy and his friends won't let anyone take you. Neither will I." Dale said nobody could stop the police. Dale was wrong about a lot of things, sweetheart. He was wrong about you most of all. What was he wrong about? Dorothy pressed her lips against Caleb's dirty blonde hair, kissed the top of his head, felt him stiffen at the contact, then slowly relax into it. "He told you that you were worthless, didn't he?" Caleb didn't answer, which was an answer. He was wrong. "You're the most valuable person I've ever known. You saved my life, Caleb. You climbed into a wrecked truck and held my hand and called for help when most grown men would have kept walking. That's not worthless. That's extraordinary." "I just called 911. "You just loved a stranger. That's the hardest thing in the world. And you did it when you were hungry and scared and hurting. Do you know how rare that is?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. Dorothy could feel his heartbeat against her chest. Fast, a hummingbird heartbeat. The heart rate of a child whose body was still running from danger, even when the danger had passed. "Mama used to hold me like this," Caleb whispered, "on her good days. She'd hold me and she'd rock and she'd sing this song about a mockingbird. She couldn't sing very good, but I liked it." Dorothy's eyes filled. She blinked hard. "Your mama loved you, Caleb. I know that for certain." "How do you know?" "Because she gave you to your daddy. She didn't know she was doing it. She thought she was running away. But somewhere in her heart, she was running toward the one person who could keep you safe. She ran to the wrong place first. Sometimes the road home goes through the dark places, baby, But you made it. You're here now. Caleb's eyes closed. His breathing slowed. His small body went limp against Dorothy's chest. The total surrender of a child who had finally, after 6 years of vigilance and terror and sleepless nights in a locked closet, found a place where he could let go. He slept, and Dorothy held him. And in the hallway, 47 Hell's Angels stood guard over a sleeping boy and a grandmother who'd traveled through fire and wreckage and blood to find each other on the side of a road that nobody used. Emmett leaned against the wall outside the door, watching through the window. His mother, his son, the two people who meant more to him than every mile he'd ever ridden, and every fight he'd ever won, and every mistake he'd ever made. Boone appeared beside him. Wheeler's making calls. Cross knows. It's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. Reeves wants to move you and the boy to the safe house. Thinks the hospital's too exposed. After he wakes up, let him sleep. Boone looked through the window at the sleeping child, at Dorothy's arms wrapped around him like armor. He's a tough kid, Emmett. He shouldn't have to be. No, he shouldn't. Boone paused. But he is. And that's because of you. Your blood, your stubbornness, your refusal to break. He didn't get that from me, Boone. He got that from surviving. And no kid should have to earn toughness the way mine did. Boone put a hand on Emmett's shoulder, squeezed once, said nothing else because nothing else needed to be said. Caleb Turner slept for 2 hours and 14 minutes, the longest uninterrupted sleep he'd had in 14 months. And when he woke, groggy and confused, and momentarily terrified before he remembered where he was, the first thing he saw was his father's face in the window, watching over him. "Dad?" His voice was thick with sleep. Emmett was in the room before the word finished leaving Caleb's mouth. "Right here, buddy. I'm right here." Caleb looked at him, at Dorothy, at the empty plate where the pancakes had been, at the world that had somehow, impossibly, rearranged itself around him while he slept. A world with a father and a grandmother and chocolate chip pancakes and 47 people in the hallway who would stand between him and anyone who tried to hurt him. "Are we going home?" Caleb asked. Emmett knelt beside the wheelchair, took his son's hand, felt the cigarette-burned scars against his palm, and made a silent promise to every god he didn't believe in that these would be the last scars his boy would ever carry. "Yeah, buddy," he said, "we're going home." They didn't make it home. The convoy was 12 miles from the safe house when Grace's phone rang. She answered on the second ring, listened for 9 seconds, and the color drained from her face so fast that Emmett, watching her in the rearview mirror, hit the brakes before she said a word. "What?" "Victor Cross just filed an emergency injunction. He's claiming Caleb is a ward of Shelby Creek County, and that removing him constitutes kidnapping across jurisdictional lines." Grace's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "He's got 3 attorneys, a state senator backing the motion, and a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning in Nashville. Judge Harriet Monroe." "I thought Monroe was on our side." "Monroe's fair. That's not the same thing as being on our side. She'll follow the law. And right now, Cross's lawyers are building a legal case that you're an unfit parent with a criminal record who took a child from his legal guardian by force. His legal guardian beat him with fists and burned him with cigarettes. That's what we need to prove. In court, with evidence. Tomorrow." Emmett's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Caleb was asleep again, curled against Dorothy's side, his small body rising and falling with the deep, trusting breaths of a child who'd finally stopped fighting consciousness. He looked so small, so fragile, like something the world could break without even trying. "What do we need?" Emmett asked. "Everything. Dr. Chen's medical report, the FBI's documentation, CPS records, character witnesses, and Caleb." "No." "Emmett, I said no. He's been through enough. I'm not putting him in front of a judge and asking him to relive every cigarette burn and every night in that closet for a room full of lawyers. It won't be a room full of lawyers. Monroe does children's testimony in chambers, video conference, just the judge and a social worker. But Emmett, without Caleb's own words, Cross's attorneys will argue that the injuries are exaggerated, that Dale was a flawed but caring guardian, that you're using the child as a pawn in a custody dispute. A pawn. The word came out like a bullet. My son is covered in scars, and they'll call him a pawn. They'll call him whatever wins the case. That's what lawyers do. Emmett drove in silence for 3 miles. The convoy of Hell's Angels stretched behind them, 47 motorcycles moving through the Tennessee afternoon like a river of chrome and purpose. Grace, if I lose tomorrow, what happens to Caleb? Grace didn't answer immediately. That was the answer. He goes into state custody, she finally said. Foster care, a group home, maybe back to Shelby Creek County if Wheeler's people get their way before the federal case shuts them down. Back to the system that put him with Dale in the first place? Yes. Over my dead body. That's not a legal strategy, Emmett. Then find me a legal strategy that works, because my son is not going back into that system. Not tomorrow, not ever. The safe house was organized chaos by nightfall. Grace had commandeered the kitchen table as her war room, surrounded by legal pads and case files, and 3 laptops running simultaneously. Agent Reeves had sent 2 FBI agents to stand guard outside, which created the surreal image of federal law enforcement and Hell's Angels sharing perimeter duty. Dr. Chen arrived at 7 p.m. with Caleb's complete medical file, every photograph, every measurement, every clinical notation documenting 14 months of systematic abuse. She spread the photographs across the table, and the room went silent. Even Boone, who'd seen combat and prison violence and the kind of brutality that most people only read about, turned away from the images of a 6-year-old's body mapped with burns and bruises. These will be compelling, Grace said, studying the photos with the clinical detachment of someone who trained herself not to feel while she worked. But Cross's lawyers will argue that injuries can be fabricated, that a biased physician could exaggerate findings. Fabricated? Dr. Chen's voice went sharp. That child has a healed radius fracture that was never treated. You can't fabricate bone growth on an X-ray. I know that. You know that. We need the judge to know that. I'll testify, in person. I'll bring the X-rays, the blood work, the nutritional assessments, every piece of clinical evidence that proves what was done to that boy. Good. What about his psychological state? I've referred him to Dr. Elena Marsh, a child trauma specialist in Nashville. She can't do a full assessment by tomorrow, but she can provide a preliminary evaluation based on behavioral observation. Get her here tonight. Dr. Marsh arrived at 9 p.m. She was 45, calm in the way that people who deal with broken children learn to be, with an economy of movement that suggested she was careful about everything she did because carelessness cost children. Caleb was in the living room with Dorothy, watching a cooking show on the old television. He'd eaten dinner, actual dinner, chicken and rice and green beans that one of the Hell's Angels' wives had brought to the safe house in a casserole dish. And he was leaning against Dorothy's wheelchair with the boneless relaxation of a child discovering what comfort felt like. Caleb? Emmett knelt beside him. There's a lady here who wants to talk to you. Her name's Dr. Marsh. She's nice. She just wants to ask you some questions. Caleb's body went rigid. The wall came up. Instant. What kind of questions? About how you're feeling, about what you like, about what makes you happy and what makes you scared. Am I in trouble? No, buddy, you're not in trouble. Nobody's in trouble. Dale said when people ask questions, it means trouble. Dale was wrong. Emmett took his son's hand, felt the scars. These people are here to help you, all of them. That's the only reason they're here. Caleb looked at Dorothy. She nodded. Go on, sweetheart. I'll be right here when you're done. Dr. Marsh met with Caleb in one of the bedrooms, just the two of them. She sat on the floor, which put her at his eye level, And she didn't ask about Dale or the closet or the burns. She asked about the stray cat behind the Dollar General, about the book with the wild things, about the pancakes Dorothy had made. She asked Caleb to draw a picture of his family. He drew two figures, a small one and a big one. The big one had a beard and was wearing something that looked like a vest. The small one was holding the big one's hand. "Who's this?" Dr. Marsh asked, pointing to the big figure. "My dad." "And this?" "Me." "Anyone else in your family?" Caleb picked up the crayon again, drew a third figure in a chair with wheels. "Grandma Dot," then a fourth off to the side, floating above the others. "Mama, she's in heaven, but she's still family." Dr. Marsh noted that Caleb had not drawn Dale, had not drawn any figure associated with his previous home. The family in Caleb's mind had already reorganized itself around the people who'd shown him love in the last 36 hours. "Caleb, can I ask you something important?" "Okay." "Where do you want to live?" "With my dad." "Are you sure?" "He promised nobody would hurt me again, and Grandma Dot made me pancakes." He paused, considering this with the gravity of a philosopher examining first principles. "People who make you pancakes don't lock you in closets." Dr. Marsh excused herself, walked to the hallway, found Grace and Emmett waiting. "Preliminary assessment," she said. "Caleb exhibits classic markers of complex childhood trauma, hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation masked by extreme self-control, dissociative responses to pain stimuli, attachment disruption consistent with prolonged abuse by a primary caregiver." "In English," Emmett said, "he's been hurt so badly and for so long that his brain has rewired itself to survive. He doesn't trust adults. He doesn't feel safe. He doesn't believe that kindness is real because every time he's experienced it, it's been followed by pain." Dr. Marsh paused. "But here's what matters for tomorrow. Despite all of that, he's already forming attachment bonds with you and with Dorothy. That's remarkable. Children this traumatized usually take months or years to begin trusting again. Caleb's doing it in hours." "What does that mean?" "It means he wants to trust you. It means somewhere inside him, past all the damage, there's a child who's ready to love his father if you give him the chance." She looked at Emmett. "Don't blow it." "I won't." "One more thing. He drew his family. You, Dorothy, his mother in heaven, 4 people. Dale wasn't in the picture, not even as a negative figure. Caleb has already erased him." Emmett leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, let the weight of everything settle onto his shoulders. The grief and the rage and the desperate, terrified hope that tomorrow would go right. "He drew me," Emmett said quietly. "He drew you holding his hand," Dr. Marsh said. "That's the image he carries when he thinks about safety. A big man holding his hand." The night passed in fragments. Grace worked until 3 a.m., building her case with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation where one wrong cut means death. Emmett dozed in a chair outside Caleb's room, waking every time the boy shifted or murmured in his sleep. Dorothy stayed awake in her wheelchair, watching the door, guarding her grandson with the fierce stillness of a woman who'd survived a car wreck, a gunshot-free but equally violent confrontation with corrupt law enforcement, and 72 years of hard Tennessee living. At 4 a.m., Caleb screamed. Emmett was through the door before the echo died. Caleb was sitting up in bed, drenched in sweat, eyes wide and blind with a terror that belonged to a different time and place. "The closet," Caleb gasped. "He locked me in. He locked me in, and it's dark, and I can't breathe." "You're not in the closet." Emmett sat on the edge of the bed. Didn't grab him, didn't restrain him, just sat there, solid and present. "You're in the safe house, with me. You're safe." "I can't breathe." "You can breathe. Listen to me breathe. In and out. In and out. Match me." Caleb's wild eyes found Emmett's face, locked on. His chest heaved, his hands clutched the sheets. But slowly, breath by breath, he matched his father's rhythm. In and out, in and out. The panic receded like a tide pulling back from a shore it had tried to drown. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy." "I dreamed he came back. Dale came back and nobody stopped him." "Nobody's coming back. I'm here." "What if the judge sends me away?" Emmett's heart cracked, clean down the middle, because he couldn't answer that. Couldn't guarantee what a judge would decide. Couldn't promise something that wasn't entirely in his control. "Then I'll come get you," Emmett said. "If they send you to the moon, I'll build a rocket. If they send you to the bottom of the ocean, I'll learn to swim. There is nowhere on this earth they can put you that I won't find you. Do you hear me? Nowhere." "You mean that?" "I mean that more than I've ever meant anything." Caleb reached for his hand, held it, squeezed with the grip of a child who was testing the strength of a promise, and finding for the first time that it held. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "I'll stay all night." "Okay." Caleb lay back down. Emmett held his hand, and sometime before dawn, father and son both fell asleep. Emmett slumped in the chair with his arm extended to the bed. Caleb curled on his side with his fingers wrapped around his father's thumb, the same grip he'd had at 3 weeks old when Emmett held him for the first time and thought, "This is what I've been waiting for." The Nashville courthouse at 8:45 a.m. was a circus. News vans lined the street, reporters clustered on the steps, cameras ready, microphones extended like weapons. Somebody had leaked the story, a biker president fighting for custody of an abused child, and the media had descended with the predatory efficiency of sharks smelling blood. Emmett pulled the van to the rear entrance. Grace had called ahead. The bailiff was waiting, ready to escort them through the back corridors to Judge Monroe's courtroom. Caleb held Emmett's hand as they walked through the courthouse. His eyes were huge, taking in the marble floors and the echoing hallways, and the people in suits moving with the self-important urgency of a world that had never locked a child in a closet and therefore couldn't understand what that world felt like from the inside. "Dad, this place is big." "Yeah, buddy." "Are there bad people here?" "Some, but there are good people too, and the good ones are going to help us." "How do you know which ones are good?" "The good ones look at you, the bad ones look past you." Cross's legal team was already in the courtroom, 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than most people's cars. The lead attorney was a man named Philip Drake, silver-haired, tailored, with the smooth confidence of someone who'd never lost a case and considered losing a character flaw that happened to other people. Beside Drake sat a woman Emmett didn't recognize, mid-40s, sharp features, a briefcase so organized it looked like a weapon. "Cross's personal counsel," Grace whispered, "brought in from Atlanta, and in the gallery trying to look like concerned citizens rather than what he actually was, sat Victor Cross himself. 62 years old, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit and a red tie, and an expression of patient concern that was as manufactured as the pharmaceuticals he distributed through trailers across rural Tennessee. He looked like a grandfather, like a deacon, like the kind of man who sponsored Little League teams and donated to children's hospitals. Emmett wanted to kill him, not metaphorically, not figuratively. He wanted to cross that courtroom and wrap his hands around Victor Cross's throat and squeeze until the manufactured concern melted into the genuine terror that Cross had inflicted on hundreds of children through his network of dealers and cooks and men like Dale Scoggins, who use kids as shields and products. Grace grabbed his arm. "Don't even look at him. The second you show aggression, Drake uses it. That's what they want." "I know what they want." "Then act like it." Judge Harriet Monroe entered at 9 a.m. sharp. 62 years old, steel gray hair, a face that had been carved by decades of seeing the worst things people do to each other and refusing to become numb to any of it. She sat, surveyed the courtroom, and her gaze stopped briefly on Emmett in his leather vest, on Cross in his tailored suit, and on Caleb, who sat between Grace and Dorothy in the front row, his small legs swinging above the floor. "This is a custody hearing, not a media event," Monroe said. "Cameras off, phones off. Anyone who disrupts these proceedings will be removed and held in contempt. We're here for one reason, the welfare of a child. Let's not forget that." Drake went first, smooth, polished, every word calibrated to inflict maximum damage while maintaining the appearance of compassion. "Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about the welfare of young Caleb Turner. Mr. Garrison, while perhaps well-intentioned, has a documented criminal history, including felony assault and association with a known motorcycle organization. He has no legal custody documentation, no established relationship with the child. He removed the boy from his legal guardian's care by means of an armed motorcycle convoy that terrorized a public highway." "Objection!" Grace was on her feet. "Mr. Scoggins was arrested by the FBI on federal charges, including child abuse. He was not a legitimate guardian. He was a criminal who—" "Miss Garrison, you'll have your turn," Monroe said. "Continue, Mr. Drake." "Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Garrison's claim of paternity, while potentially supported by DNA evidence, does not automatically confer custody rights. Tennessee law requires a demonstrated history of parental involvement, stable housing, financial capability, and a home environment suitable for a child. Mr. Garrison lives in a property associated with a motorcycle club. His income derives from businesses connected to that club. The child's well-being—" "Mr. Drake," Monroe's voice cut like a scalpel. "I've read the briefs. Get to your request." Drake straightened. "We request that Caleb Turner be placed in state protective custody pending a full investigation. Mr. Garrison may apply for visitation rights through proper channels." "State custody," Grace repeated, standing. "Your Honor, state custody is what placed Caleb with Dale Scoggins in the first place. State custody is what failed this child for 14 months while he was starved, beaten, and burned with cigarettes. My client—" "Your client is a convicted felon," Drake interrupted. "My client is that boy's father. DNA confirmed, and he has spent 6 years in every resource available to him trying to find his son through legal channels that moved too slowly to prevent 14 months of torture." Monroe held up a hand. Silence fell. "I want to hear from the doctors." Dr. Chen testified first, calm, clinical, devastating. She walked Monroe through every injury with x-rays and photographs projected onto a screen that made the courtroom go silent. The healed fracture, the 14 burns, the cracked ribs, the malnutrition, the developmental delays. "In your professional opinion, Dr. Chen," Grace asked, "are these injuries consistent with accidental harm?" "No, these injuries are consistent with sustained, deliberate physical abuse over a period of at least 12 months. The cigarette burns alone are diagnostic. They're uniform in size and placement. They're punishment marks, intentional, repeated." Drake cross-examined. "Doctor, is it possible that some of these injuries occurred during the incident on Route 7, when Mr. Garrison's associates surrounded Mr. Scoggins' vehicle?" "The healed radius fracture is at least 8 months old. The oldest cigarette burns are over a year old. These injuries predate any contact with Mr. Garrison. But the recent ones, the cracked ribs are consistent with kicks from an adult male. The facial bruising is consistent with a backhand blow. Both occurred within 48 hours of my examination, which was before any confrontation on Route 7. Drake sat down. He'd gained nothing. Dr. Marsh testified next. She described Caleb's psychological state, the hypervigilance, the dissociation, the trained suppression of emotional response. She described the family drawing, the 4 figures, the absence of Dale. "This child has already identified his safe people," Dr. Marsh said. "His father, his grandmother, his deceased mother. Removing him from the care of these individuals and placing him in an institutional setting would cause further traumatic harm and could potentially reverse the attachment progress he's made in the last 36 hours. You've known this child for less than a day, Drake argued. How can you make definitive claims about his attachment? Because in less than a day, he's done something that children with this level of trauma typically take months to do. He's reached for someone. He's asked to be held. He's fallen asleep in someone's arms. Those aren't things that damaged children do casually, Mr. Drake. Those are acts of extraordinary courage from a boy who's been taught that trusting adults leads to pain. Monroe leaned forward. Dr. Marsh, if this child is returned to state custody, what is your prognosis? Regression, emotional shutdown, possible complete withdrawal. He'll interpret the removal as confirmation that adults can't be trusted, that love is temporary, that the closet is the only safe place. And if he stays with his father, then he has a chance, a real chance at healing. Agent Reeves testified about the federal investigation, about Dale's meth operation, about Victor Cross's network, about Sheriff Wheeler's corruption. And then he said something that changed the temperature of the entire courtroom. Your Honor, our investigation has revealed that Victor Cross's organization uses children in drug-producing households as cover for trafficking operations. Mr. Scoggins' trailer was flagged in our investigation as a potential transit point. The child Caleb Turner may have been at risk of exploitation beyond the physical abuse he already suffered. Drake was on his feet. Objection! Speculation! There's no evidence that my client— Your client, Reeves said, turning to face Drake with the full authority of the federal government behind his eyes, is the subject of a 47-count federal indictment that was unsealed this morning, including 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic minors. The courtroom erupted. Monroe banged her gavel. Drake's face went the color of old milk. And in the gallery, Victor Cross stood up, buttoned his suit jacket with hands that trembled, and walked toward the exit. 2 FBI agents met him at the door. Victor Cross, the first agent said, you're under arrest. Cross didn't resist, didn't speak, just held out his wrists with the practiced calm of a man who'd always known this day might come and had spent years building walls that were never thick enough. Monroe restored order, looked at Drake. Counselor, would you like to continue representing your client's interests in this matter? Or would you like a moment to reconsider your position? Drake closed his briefcase. No further arguments, Your Honor. I didn't think so. Monroe turned to Grace. Ms. Garrison, is your client prepared to address the court? Emmett stood. He'd worn the leather vest because Grace told him to take it off, and Dorothy told him to keep it on. That's who you are, Dorothy had said. Don't pretend to be something else for a judge. If she can't accept you as you are, she doesn't deserve to decide your son's future. Mr. Garrison, Monroe said, tell me why I should give you custody of this child. Emmett looked at Caleb. The boy was watching him from the front row, legs swinging, eyes wide. Dorothy's hand on his shoulder, the complete photograph of Amber and Emmett tucked into the pocket of his new jacket, over his heart. Because he's my son, Emmett said, and I'm his father. And I know those are just words. I know my record doesn't look good on paper. I know my life doesn't fit in a box that the system finds comfortable. But I've spent 6 years looking for that boy. 6 years of lawyers and dead ends, and nights where I'd hold his baby picture and beg God to let me find him. His voice cracked. He let it. I wasn't there for his first word, or his first step, or his first day of school, because he never had a first day of school. I wasn't there when he was hungry or scared, or when Dale Scoggins put cigarettes out on his skin. I failed him for 6 years. I know that. I live with that. But I'm here now. I'm here and I'm asking you to let me be his father, not because I deserve it, I probably don't, but because that boy deserves a father. He deserves someone who'll make him pancakes and read him books and stay awake all night when the nightmares come. He deserves someone who'll never lock him in a closet or burn him or tell him he's worthless. I can be that someone, not because I'm perfect, Because I'm his, and he's mine. Monroe was quiet for a long time. She looked at Caleb. I'd like to speak with the child. The video conference was set up in chambers. Just Monroe, Caleb, and a court-appointed social worker named Linda, who'd met Caleb at the group home and had driven to Nashville specifically for this hearing. Caleb sat in a chair that was too big for him. His feet dangled. His hands were in his lap. He looked at the camera with the careful stillness of a child who understood that what he said in the next few minutes would determine the rest of his life. "Hi, Caleb," Monroe said. Her voice was different in chambers, softer. "Do you know why you're here?" "The judge is deciding where I live." "That's right, and I'm the judge. My name is Harriet. Can you tell me about your dad?" "He's big. He has a motorcycle. He cried when he held me." "Is that a good thing, that he cried?" "Dale never cried. Dale just hit. People who cry feel things. People who feel things don't burn you." Monroe closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 second of letting herself feel what she trained herself to compartmentalize. Then she opened them. "Caleb, do you want to live with your dad?" "Yes, ma'am." "Are you sure?" "He said he'd find me anywhere, even the moon, even the ocean. I believe him." "Why?" "Because he was already looking before he found me, for 6 whole years. That's my whole life. He was looking for my whole life." Monroe ended the conference, returned to the courtroom. Everyone stood as she entered. Everyone sat when she sat. And then she spoke. "In the matter of custody of the minor child Caleb Turner, I've reviewed the testimony of medical professionals, federal law enforcement, psychological experts, and the child himself." She looked at Emmett. "Mr. Garrison, your history is not what I'd typically consider ideal for a custodial parent, but this case is not typical. Nothing about it is typical. The child before me has been failed by every system designed to protect him. State agencies placed him with an abuser. Local law enforcement looked the other way. The judicial system moved too slowly. He was invisible. And the only person who never stopped looking for him was the man sitting in this courtroom in a leather vest. Emergency temporary custody is granted to Emmett Garrison, effective immediately. Full custody hearing to follow in 90 days. The court orders CPS home inspections, continued psychological care for the child, and regular reporting to this court. She banged her gavel. "This child is going home." The courtroom erupted. Grace collapsed into her chair. Dorothy wept openly. And Caleb Turner, 6 years old, who'd spent his whole life being invisible, climbed over the gallery railing before anyone could stop him and ran to his father. Emmett caught him, lifted him, led him against his chest with both arms, and buried his face in his son's blonde hair, and let out a sound that was part sob and part roar and part the release of 6 years of grief, finally finding somewhere to go. "We did it, buddy," Emmett whispered. "We're going home." "For real?" "For real." "Forever?" Emmett pulled back, looked at his son's face, at the bruises fading, at the swollen eye that was finally opening, at the blue eyes that were his eyes, staring back at him with the first unguarded expression of hope he'd ever seen on this child's face. "Forever, Caleb. I promise, and I don't break promises." "Grandma Dot said you don't." "Grandma Dot's the smartest person I know." Outside the courthouse, 47 Hells Angels waited. They'd stood in the August heat for 3 hours without complaint, without moving, without wavering. When the courthouse doors opened and Emmett walked out carrying his son, they didn't cheer, didn't shout, didn't rev their engines. They stood at attention. 47 men and women in leather and patches, and decades of hard living, standing straight and still as soldiers, honoring the boy who'd saved their matriarch and the father who'd fought the world to bring him home. Then Boone Fletcher, the biggest and toughest and least sentimental man in the Tennessee Hells Angels, started crying. And one by one, like a wave moving through a forest, Every rider followed. Caleb, perched on his father's hip, looked out at the sea of faces, at the tears, at the leather, at the family he didn't know he had. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Are they all crying?" "Yeah, buddy, they are." "Why?" "Because you're coming home, and that makes them happy." Caleb considered this, considered the impossible math of people crying because they were happy, and happy because a boy they'd never met was finally safe. "That's a lot of people," he said. "That's your family," Emmett replied. Caleb looked at the bikers one more time, at Dorothy in her wheelchair, beaming through her tears, at Grace wiping her eyes with legal documents she no longer needed, at Boone, who'd blown his nose into a bandana and was pretending he had allergies. "Okay," Caleb said, and he smiled. Not the ghost smile from the hospital, not the tentative, fragile expression that could shatter at a loud noise. A real smile, the first real smile of his life, given freely to the world without fear of what the world might do with it. 47 Hells Angels saw it, and every single one of them would later say it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever witnessed. 3 months changed everything and nothing. Caleb still woke up screaming some nights, still checked the locks on every door before bed, still flinched when Emmett moved too fast or spoke too loud, still ate like someone might take the plate away, shoveling food with both hands until Dorothy gently reminded him that the kitchen wasn't going anywhere, and neither was breakfast. But he laughed now. Not often, not easily. But the sound existed in the farmhouse where it had never existed before, and every time it happened, Emmett would stop whatever he was doing and close his eyes and let it wash over him like rain on a drought. Dr. Marsh came twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Caleb would sit on the floor of her office with crayons and paper and draw while she asked questions that didn't sound like questions. He drew motorcycles. He drew Dorothy's pancakes. He drew the stray cat behind the Dollar General, which Boone had driven back to Shelby Creek to retrieve, and which now lived in Caleb's bedroom and slept on his pillow, and had been named Sergeant because Caleb heard someone call Boone Sergeant at Arms and thought it sounded important. "He's making progress," Dr. Marsh told Emmett after the 6th session. "Real progress, not the performative compliance that traumatized children sometimes display to please adults. Genuine emotional growth." "How can you tell the difference?" "Because he argued with Dorothy yesterday about bedtime. A child who's performing compliance doesn't argue. A child who feels safe enough to push back is a child who trusts that pushing back won't get him hurt." Emmett had heard the argument. Dorothy insisting on 8:30. Caleb lobbying hard for 9 o'clock because the cooking show didn't end until 8:45 and it was rude to turn off the television before the chef finished the souffle. Dorothy had counter-offered 8:45. Caleb had accepted with the gravity of a seasoned negotiator. It was the most beautiful argument Emmett had ever heard. School started in September, first grade at Mill Creek Elementary, 15 minutes from the farmhouse. Grace had enrolled him, provided the documentation, handled the meetings with the principal, who'd been understandably concerned about a child with no educational history and a father whose name appeared in news articles next to the words Motorcycle Club President. Caleb's first day was a Tuesday. Emmett drove him, not on the motorcycle, in the truck. Dorothy had insisted. "You're not dropping a 6-year-old off at school on a Harley, Emmett. I don't care how cool you think it looks." "It does look cool." "I didn't say it didn't. I said you're not doing it." Caleb wore new clothes, jeans that fit, a blue t-shirt, sneakers with laces that Dorothy had taught him to tie, using a rhyme about a bunny and a hole that Caleb thought was ridiculous but effective. His backpack was red. Inside it were 2 pencils, a notebook, and a peanut butter sandwich that Dorothy had cut into triangles because Caleb said triangles tasted better than squares, and nobody had told him otherwise. "Dad?" Caleb's voice was small in the truck's cab. "What if nobody likes me?" "Then they're missing out." "What if I'm dumb?" "You're not dumb. You taught yourself to read from a book you found in a dumpster. That's the opposite of dumb. What if the teacher asks where I've been? Emmett pulled the truck over, turned to face his son. You've been right here, living your life, and now you're starting school. That's all anyone needs to know. But Caleb, if anyone asks you a question you don't want to answer, you just say, I'd rather not talk about that, okay? Is that allowed? It's always allowed. Your story belongs to you. Nobody gets to hear it unless you decide to share it. Okay. Caleb looked at the school, took a breath. Dad? Yeah, buddy. Will you be here when I get out? I'll be right here in this spot, 3:15, not a minute late. Promise? Promise. Caleb got out of the truck, walked toward the entrance, stopped, turned around, ran back and threw his arms around Emmett's waist through the open door so hard that Emmett had to grab the steering wheel to keep from falling out. I love you, Dad. 3 words, 6 syllables. The first time Caleb had ever said them to anyone and meant it since his mother died on a bathroom floor 18 months ago. Emmett's throat closed. His eyes burned. His arms wrapped around his son and held him with the careful ferocity of a man holding something precious that the world had tried to destroy. I love you too, buddy. More than motorcycles. That's a lot. That's everything. Caleb let go, squared his shoulders in a way that looked exactly like Emmett and exactly like Amber and exactly like a boy who was learning that brave didn't mean unafraid. It meant afraid and walking forward anyway. He walked into school, didn't look back, and Emmett sat in the truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, unable to drive, unable to see through the tears, unable to do anything except breathe and be grateful, and let the magnitude of the moment settle into his bones. The legal case wrapped up in October. Victor Cross was convicted on 47 federal counts: drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic minors that added decades to his sentence and ensured he die behind bars, wondering how a 6-year-old boy on a county road had unraveled an empire it took him 20 years to build. Sheriff Buck Wheeler got 18 years. Deputy Phelps, who'd handed his badge to Emmett in that hospital hallway and stood with the bikers instead of the badge, testified for the prosecution. His testimony broke the case open. He was offered his job back by the new sheriff. He declined, took a position with the FBI's Victim Services Unit instead, said he'd spent enough time on the wrong side of a badge and wanted to spend the rest of his career on the right one. Dale Scoggins cooperated with federal prosecutors, named names, drew maps, gave up every connection in Cross's network in exchange for a reduced sentence that still added up to 15 years in federal prison. Emmett didn't attend the sentencing, didn't need to. Dale Scoggins was already gone from his son's life, erased as completely as the man in the torn photograph, present only in the scars he'd left behind. Judge Monroe granted full custody in November. The hearing lasted 12 minutes. The ruling was 3 pages. The final paragraph read, "The court finds that Emmett Garrison has demonstrated extraordinary commitment to his son's welfare. The child is thriving. Custody is granted without reservation." Dorothy cried. Grace cried. Boone blew his nose into his bandana and claimed the November air was giving him allergies. And Caleb, sitting on Emmett's lap in the courtroom, looked up at the judge and said, "Thank you, ma'am. Can we go home now? Grandma Dot's making pie." Monroe smiled, actually smiled, the first smile anyone in that courtroom had ever seen on Judge Harriet Monroe's face. "Yes, Caleb, you can go home." The Hells Angels threw a party at the farmhouse that weekend. Not a biker party, a family party. Boone brought his 7-year-old daughter Lily, who grabbed Caleb's hand within 30 seconds of arriving and dragged him into a game of tag that expanded to include every child on the property. Someone set up a bounce house. Someone else built a bonfire. Dorothy made 3 chocolate cakes because she'd miscounted, and nobody complained. Caleb played with children his own age for the first time in his life. He didn't know the rules. didn't understand the rhythms of play that other kids had absorbed naturally through years of practice. He stood at the edges, watching, calculating, until Lily grabbed him again and said, "You're it." And suddenly he was running and laughing and being 6 years old in a way that nobody had ever let him be. Emmett watched from the porch, beer in his hand, Boone beside him. "He's going to be okay," Boone said. "Yeah, he is. You know what I keep thinking about? If your mama hadn't crashed her truck on that road, if she'd swerved a second earlier, if the deer had crossed somewhere else, the boy would still be in that closet." "I know. That's one hell of a coincidence." "Maybe, or maybe some things aren't coincidences." Boone looked at him. "You getting spiritual on me, brother?" "I'm getting grateful. There's a difference." That night after the guests left and the bonfire burned down to embers and Dorothy snored softly in her rocking chair with Sergeant the cat on her lap, Emmett found Caleb in his bedroom, sitting on the bed, holding the photograph, the complete one. Amber and Emmett, young and hopeful, standing beside a Harley with the Tennessee hills behind them. Caleb had taped it to the wall beside his bed, so it was the first thing he saw every morning. "You miss her?" Emmett asked from the doorway. "Every day. Is that okay?" "That's more than okay. Missing someone means they mattered." She mattered. She mattered more than she knew. Caleb traced Amber's face with his finger. "She was sick, wasn't she? That's why she couldn't take care of me. She was sick, and she loved you. Both of those things were true at the same time." "That's confusing." "Yeah, buddy, it is." "Dad," Caleb looked up, "do you think she knows that I found you? That I'm okay?" Emmett crossed the room, sat on the bed, put his arm around his son, who leaned into him without hesitation, without flinching, without checking first to see if the arm was going to hurt or hold. Progress measured not in words, but in the absence of fear. "I think she knows. I think she's been watching this whole time, and I think she's proud of you." "Because I saved Grandma Dot?" "Because you stopped. On that road carrying stolen soup cans, with burns on your arms and nothing in your stomach, you heard someone calling for help, and you stopped. Every person in this world walked past you for 6 years. Every adult who should have noticed you, should have helped you, should have seen the burns and the bruises and the hunger. They all kept walking. And the first chance you got to be like them, to walk past someone who needed help, you didn't. You stopped." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I couldn't walk past her, Dad. She sounded like Mama, on her good days, when she was scared and reaching for me in the dark. That's not weakness, buddy. That's strength, the strongest kind there is." "What kind?" "The kind that chooses to love people even when the world has given you every reason not to." Caleb yawned, the deep, unguarded yawn of a child who was sleepy because he felt safe, not because his body had surrendered to exhaustion. He climbed under the covers, pulled them to his chin. Sergeant jumped onto the bed and curled against his legs. "Dad, will you read me the Wild Things book? Every night for the rest of your life if you want. Maybe not every night, but tonight." Emmett picked up the battered copy of Where the Wild Things Are that Caleb had found in a dumpster and carried through a life that no child should have survived. He opened it to the first page. "The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another." Caleb's eyes drifted shut before the wild rumpus started. His breathing deepened. His hand relaxed on the blanket, palm up, the cigarette burn scars fading to white circles that would never fully disappear, but would someday be just marks on skin instead of maps of suffering. Emmett closed the book, kissed his son's forehead, stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the rise and fall of that small chest, listening to the sound of a child breathing without fear. Then he walked out to the porch where Dorothy was awake now, rocking in her chair, watching the stars. "He asleep?" "Before the Wild Things even showed up," Dorothy smiled. "His mother used to fall asleep during that book too. The way a 6-year-old says something too big for grammar. The way truth sounds when it doesn't need to be polished. A boy stopped on the side of a road because he heard someone calling for help. He didn't know she was a biker's mother, didn't know she was his grandmother, didn't know that holding her hand for 22 minutes would bring down a drug empire and a corrupt sheriff and reunite a father and son who'd been separated since birth. He just knew someone was hurt, and he could help. And walking past was not something he was willing to do. That's not a story about bikers or courtrooms or corrupt cops or custody battles. That's a story about a boy who chose love when the world taught him nothing but pain. And sometimes one good kid is all it takes to change everything.